All right. Welcome to Atlanta. My name is Richard Nephew, and I serve as the State Department's first ever coordinator on global anti-corruption. If everything goes to plan, I will have the honor and privilege to serve as the president of the 10th session of the UN Convention Against Corruption, Conference of the States Parties, or UNCAC COSP, which is probably an acronym I don't need to say to everyone here. I don't know if you'll see that as a blessing or as a curse, but I am looking forward to it nonetheless. And what better way to kick off this week than to welcome all of you to the first ever Civil Society Forum on the margins of the UNCAC COSP. When the United States secured its bid to host the 10th session, we had the important but daunting task of determining what our COSP priorities would be. What issues were so pressing and important that the United States would use the profile and prominence of the COSP to advance them. And from the very start of those discussions, promoting and championing the role of civil society was at the top of our list. This is why we have collaborated with the UN Office of Drugs and Crime and UNCAC Coalition to organize this groundbreaking forum. We wanted to provide a space for civil society to showcase the expertise and experience you all bring to the many issues the COSP will discuss in the coming week, and give space for all of you to advise us as to what we can do to address our common challenge. This forum would not have been possible without UNODC and the UNCAC Coalition. So let me express my gratitude for all their hard work and innovation as we turn this concept into reality. And ask for a round of applause. Over the next couple of hours, we will get to hear from a diversity of voices from civil society, international organizations, and governments. We hope these discussions are informative and candid. We're here to listen and learn from each other. Before introducing our first speaker, I would like to quickly outline the program we have planned for today. Following this opening session, there will be a series of breakout sessions. These have been organized by partners in civil society and touch on many of the topics covered in the resolutions the COSP will adopt this week. You can find the topics on these sessions and their location on the agenda. Some of them will be here in this room, and others will be in different rooms in the convention center. And I will start by encouraging everyone to explore the other spaces in addition to this one. Following the breakout sessions, we'll all convene back here at 4 p.m. for a closing panel. It's a busy schedule, so let's get started. I'd like to first introduce UNODC Executive Director Wally. In addition to serving as Secretariat to the convention, UNODC provides support for implementation of UNCAC. It's fair to say none of this would be possible without UNODC and Executive Director Wally's leadership. Executive Director Wally, welcome.
It's still not noon, so good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. Coordinator Mr. Richard Nephew, distinguished speakers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you today to discuss the role of civil society in the fight against corruption. I would like to thank Her Excellency Under-Secretary Uzra Zeya for joining this forum. I'm also grateful to the UNCAC Coalition, a long-standing partner of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, and its Managing Director, Matthias Hutter, for joining us. And I would like to welcome Sanjay Pradhan, CEO of Open Government Partnership, as he represents many civil society organizations present here today. This session of the Conference of States Parties comes at a unique moment for the international anti-corruption agenda. We are marking the landmark 20th anniversary of the UN Convention Against Corruption, precisely at the halfway point of our journey towards Agenda 2030. At the SDG Summit earlier this year, member states underscored the urgency of taking accelerated action to rescue the Sustainable Development Goals by amplifying global efforts to combat corruption. They recognized, too, that these efforts must involve civil society, who are a vital ally in our aspirations to achieve the SDGs and build a world united against corruption. Civil society voices are needed more than ever at a time when corruption is holding back societies and erecting roadblocks on our path to reaching the SDGs. Corruption erodes the pillars of accountability, transparency, and integrity that holds institutions together, and strikes the fundamental rights that define our very humanity, including our right to justice, equal opportunities, and speaking truth to power. Civil society should be the watchful protectors of these rights. They are expected to speak for everyone, giving a voice to the powerless, and are expected to adhere to the highest standards of transparency regarding their governance, their funding, and their impartiality. When the voices of civil society are heard, transparency and accountability are protected. Today, we stand united to speak up against corruption and amplify the voice of the voiceless, especially the most vulnerable in society, including youth, women, and the marginalized. The UNCAC is our guiding light in these efforts. Following its adoption 20 years ago, it has gone on to achieve near universal adherence. As the guardian of the Convention, UNODC is proud to engage with civil society in supporting its implementation. And it has been my personal commitment to engage with civil society in all our work. Since the last conference of states parties 2 years ago, we have engaged with over 1,000 civil society organizations, stakeholders who are monitoring the UNCAC implementation, and facilitated intergovernmental meetings between CSOs, governments, and the private sector. Our implementation review mechanism, launched in 2010, has built a bridge between governments and civil society, helping to develop comprehensive strategies, address the root causes of corruption, and champion sustainable solutions. In the past decade, the mechanism has identified over 9,000 challenges in technical assistance and facilitated the exchange of 1,500 best practices to fill implementation gaps. Many states parties have facilitated country visits by civil society organizations, enabling them to engage in direct, formal consultations and resulting in valuable recommendations and follow-up actions. UNODC is also proud to partner with the UNCAC Coalition to drive these efforts forward. We have supported the coalition in establishing 4 regional platforms across Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, and Latin America to engage civil society in observing and promoting UNCAC implementation. We have developed publications to provide guidance and assistance to civil society, along with capacity building to fast-track implementation of the UNCAC. And we provide legislative assistance to strengthen anti-corruption frameworks, including on whistleblower protection, a topic put forward in one of this year's resolutions. Excellencies, civil society bring an invaluable wealth of expertise to the table, grounded in grassroots experience and rigorous research. They can identify gaps in implementation, provide advice, and build capacities. Their value is reflected in the multitude of special events or co-organized by civil society, led or co-organized by civil society throughout this coming week. Over 900 NGOs representatives, a record-breaking number, will be contributing to this year's discussions, showcasing the continued relevance and convening power of this forum. This is an opportunity to share innovative approaches, best practices, and solutions to the challenges we face in the fight against corruption. I encourage member states to harness the diverse experience of civil society and to collaborate with them to translate the outcomes of this conference and the provisions of the UNCAC into tangible actions. Ladies and gentlemen, the UNCAC has long recognized the indispensable role of civil society in fighting corruption. As we celebrate the 20th anniversary, we also celebrate those who defend and champion its values. In the words of the Nobel Prize winner laureate Rigoberta Menchú, without strong watchdog institutions, impunity becomes the very foundation upon which systems of corruption are built. And if impunity is not demolished, all efforts to bring an end to corruption are in vain. Together, let us ensure that our discussions in the coming days and beyond are not in vain, and that we include the irrepressible voices of civil society for a world united against corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Wally. I would like to now introduce Matthias Hutter, Managing Director of the UNCAC Coalition. The UNCAC Coalition has been an invaluable partner in the organization of this forum, but also in organizing civil society's engagement in the COSP itself. Matthias, welcome.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's fantastic to see so many anti-corruption fighters here at this first ever Civil Society Forum. A big thank you to the teams from the State Department, UNODC, who made this happen, and for the good cooperation on organizing today's events. Thank you also to the panelists and experts who have agreed to share their insights and expertise at this event today. In the breakout sessions, we will discuss issues that are at the center of the deliberations here at the COSP in the next week, including beneficial ownership transparency, procurement transparency, the links between organized crime and corruption, and the links between gender and corruption. Those are all subjects that are addressed by dedicated resolutions. There will also be a session on the role of enablers of corruption. The discussions will showcase the expertise that civil society brings to the table and provide an opportunity for an exchange of views between civil society experts and government experts, which we hope will inform the informal negotiations that continue tomorrow. Please take advantage also of the great networking opportunities that today offers. Meet new collaborators, make new connections. One session this afternoon will focus on the enabling environment for civil society in multilateral affairs. From this week's COSP, 5 leading NGOs have been excluded. This may seem like a procedural technicality to some, but it is more than that. It has a chilling effect that goes beyond the walls of this convention center. It is a reminder of the pressure and persecution that many brave reporters, whistleblowers, and civil society representatives face when they speak up against corruption. Some are forced to pay a very high price for that. I'm thinking of our colleague Gubat Ibaduglu, who was supposed to be with us in this room today, and his wife Irada, who have been beaten, and he has been detained by his government on trumped-up charges because of his anti-corruption work. His son Emin is with us in the room today to tell the story of his father, because he's worried that his dad may not survive his imprisonment to tell it. I'm convinced that the people in this room today share the commitment to moving the global fight against corruption forward. To the government delegates here, I encourage you to take advantage of the civil society experts present. We as civil society stand ready to support relevant and meaningful resolutions. Do attend the informals and actively support strong language on the role of civil society and back proposals that will help us to move the anti-corruption agenda forward. In your COSP plenary interventions, highlight your collaboration with civil society and join our efforts to allow civil society to have a seat at the table and the right to participate in national UNCAC review processes as well as in the meetings of COSP subsidiary bodies. And on Monday, tomorrow, actively support the removal of unjustified objections against the participation of 5 leading NGOs to help make this a truly inclusive conference and this COSP a step forward in our joint efforts to promote transparency and integrity around the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. I would now like to welcome Sanjay Pradhan. Sanjay is the CEO of Open Government Partnership, or OGP, and a leading advocate of the importance of government and civil society collaboration to advance government transparency. OGP has demonstrated over and over again that we are more effective in our anti-corruption efforts when we work together. Sanjay, welcome.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everyone. Civil society is vital for UNCAC's success. We have overwhelming evidence from the Open Government Partnership, or OGP, that civil society is a powerful driver of anti-corruption reforms. We find further that their impact is multiplied when civil society works in partnership with reformers in government. OGP is such a partnership of 75 national governments, 100 local governments, and thousands of civil society organizations. OGP empowers civil society to an equal seat at the table with government to co-create reforms that make governments more open and less corrupt. Independent evaluations have shown convincingly that when government co-creates actions with civil society, the reforms are more ambitious and the results are stronger. Over the last 12 years since OGP was founded, government and civil society have together implemented over 1,000 anti-corruption reforms through OGP, of which half have been independently assessed to have delivered real progress in tackling corruption. 3 concrete examples. First, beneficial ownership transparency, on which last COSP had adopted a resolution. This year, Nigeria became the first African country to launch its beneficial ownership register through the combined efforts of civil society and government reformers leveraging the OGP platform. Civil society activists have called it the most significant law in decades that can potentially help stop the illicit flow of $15 billion US. Today, 37 OGP countries are advancing beneficial ownership reforms through OGP, including the US Corporate Transparency Act. Second example, open contracting. In Ukraine, after young reformers from government, civil society, and business opened opaque contracts, 80% of businesses reported reduced corruption. Today, Ukraine is integrating open contracting and beneficial ownership transparency in a new platform called DREAM to ensure accountability in post-war reconstruction. Today, 70 OGP members have committed to open contracting, rapidly making it a new global norm. 35 of these commitments have been independently assessed to have delivered strong results. Third area, political financing and lobbying, where we must join together to push further. Today, 22 OGP members have committed to lobbying transparency. In Ireland, to curb influence peddling, which contributed to the financial crisis, the government implemented through OGP a public register that discloses meetings and gifts between public officials and lobbyists. In Croatia, through OGP, the State Election Commission discloses income and expenses of political parties during elections, which civil society monitors. So I have cited some examples of encouraging progress, but you know what? These are grossly insufficient by themselves. We must join forces. We really need to make a much stronger collective push here at UNCAC and beyond to scale up these examples of ambitious reforms so they become the new global norms, so the corrupt exceptions have nowhere left to hide. As we head into next week, let us also ensure that the COSP commitments do not just remain high-level political rhetoric, but translate into country actions. Nearly 100 commitments made at the 2016 London Anti-Corruption Summit were put into action through OGP action plans. Since the start of the Summit for Democracy, 10 OGP countries, including Romania and Slovakia, have implemented at least one S4D commitment through their OGP action plans. So similarly, let us advance UNCAC COSP commitments. Let's put them into action through OGP action plans. Let us also ensure that UNCAC has its own accountability mechanism for implementation to give it more teeth, such as the OGP's independent reporting mechanism. So in closing, let us ensure that UNCAC inadvertently does not become a talk shop alone. Let us ensure that we deliver on the precious promise of UNCAC through action, accountability, and authentic partnership with civil society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay. Please allow me to now introduce our keynote speaker, Undersecretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, Azra Zaya. Undersecretary Zaya leads the State Department's global diplomatic efforts to, among many things, strengthen democracy, advance universal human rights, and fight corruption. She oversees many of the bureaus leading U.S. efforts to prevent and combat corruption around the world. Undersecretary Zaya has decades of diplomatic experience promoting human rights and democracy governance. And importantly for this group, she has experience working not just with, but in civil society to advance these important issues. Welcome, Undersecretary Zaya.
Thank you, Richard, for that kind introduction. And I myself am just absolutely honored to join such a distinguished group of leaders who represent the critical intersection of government, civil society, and multilateral organizations working side by side to combat the global scourge of corruption. Now, on this weekend of anniversaries, we have an opportunity to reflect on the decades of work and collaboration that have brought us to this moment here in Atlanta. 75 years ago today, members of the United Nations convened in Paris to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or UDHR. This consequential declaration set an important precedent for the international community to come together and agree on common commitments and obligations to address shared challenges facing a world ravaged by war, aggression, and injustice. 55 years later, members of the UN delivered on that legacy, making history again by adopting the first Universal Anti-Corruption Convention, the UN Convention Against Corruption, or UNCAC. And just yesterday, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the UNCAC entering into force. This document endures. Its comprehensive set of standards, measures, and rules are even more relevant today as they were 20 years ago. While the methods and the means of corruption may change, as noted in the convention, the international community is determined to prevent and control corruption, and the betrayal of the public trust will no longer be tolerated. Today's Anti-Corruption Civil Society Forum is a prime example of that determination and a key reminder that governments cannot tackle this issue alone. When President Biden released the first ever U.S. strategy on countering corruption 2 years ago, the strategy underscored the importance of governments working together with diverse partners, including civil society, to 1, increase public awareness, 2, detect and expose corruption, and 3, pursue accountability. Now, let me share 3 ways that we're breathing life into this strategy at home and abroad by working with civil society actors and organizations to achieve these 3 objectives. First, to increase public awareness of corruption's corrosive effects on societies, the United States relies on inputs and advocacy from civil society. Domestically, groups like FACT Coalition and Transparency International USA worked tirelessly to push for passage of the Corporate Transparency Act that we heard about earlier. helping address a major vulnerability in our own anti-corruption framework. In just a few weeks, new U.S. beneficial ownership requirements will go into effect, increasing transparency around corporate ownership in the United States. And this is in no small part because of civil society's efforts. Internationally, we work with anti-corruption crusaders who help to shine a light on and mitigate corruption's impact on our lives. In 2021, the State Department launched the Anti-Corruption Champions Award to recognize individuals who've demonstrated leadership, courage, and impact in preventing, exposing, and combating corruption. I'm honored that several of this year's awardees are in the audience with us today. Luis Arturo Torres Ramirez is one such champion who for over 25 years exposed dozens of cases of corrupt judges, politicians, and other public officials through his reporting in Ecuador. He's investigated exploitation of Ecuador's natural resources, corruption in the judiciary, and official links to drug trafficking. Another champion, Nikhil Dey, is also with us. He's played a seminal role in creating and developing social movements in India aimed at transparency and accountability, public audits, and participatory democracy. A second way the U.S. is elevating the fight is through steadfast advocacy and support for detecting and exposing corruption. Last year, the Departments of State and Treasury partnered with a nonprofit organization for a tech sprint, a virtual competition on using technology to uncover corruption. Additionally, USAID recently launched a first-of-its-kind membership-based proactive legal support mechanism, Reporters Shield, to safeguard journalists from libel, defamation, and spurious lawsuits meant to thwart efforts to uncover and publicize corruption. Reporters Shield started accepting members in summer 2023, and as of November 7th, 141 applications were received from more than 45 countries. Third, and finally, we are committed to holding corrupt actors to account. To this end, the State Department has contributed millions of dollars to support the Global Anti-Corruption Consortium, known as the GAC, a partnership between media and civil society that advocates to expose transnational corruption, lobbies for reforms. It promotes accountability through investigative journalism. GAC benefits from strong multilateral support with contributions from Argentina, Australia, Denmark, Norway, Taiwan, the United Kingdom, and most recently, Slovakia. This year, GAC published 33 investigations, prepared dozens of legal submissions, and pursued advocacy globally. Entities exposed through GAC's efforts now face sanctions, including several financial facilitators who knowingly helped sanctioned Russian oligarchs hide their assets. GAC advocacy has also led to tangible reforms, including strengthening international norms at the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF. And overall, in just 5 years, this initiative has shown real-world impact. The work of GAC recipients has facilitated criminal arrests, inspired legislative changes, and produced sanctions against corrupt officials. Now, this is all just a snapshot of how U.S. government and civil society actors are partnering to detect, deter, and mitigate corruption. An active and free civil society is essential to ensure that governments uphold both their responsibilities to meet the needs of their citizens, as well as their legal requirements to abide by international obligations and commitments. Individuals and groups, like all of you here with us today, bring invaluable experience and expertise that serve to inform and improve policy decisions. Now, while the challenges that we face are daunting, I remain confident that governments, working alongside our partners in civil society and beyond, can meet the moment and improve lives for millions of people around the world. So please, keep up the fight. We need each of you in it, as the consequences of inaction are simply too great. As President Biden has declared, fighting corruption is not just good governance, it is self-defense. It is patriotism, and it is essential to the preservation of our democracy and our future. Thank you all.
And thank you, Undersecretary Zia, for those inspiring remarks. I would like to once again thank you all for joining today and conclude this opening session. We encourage everyone to now join the various breakout sessions starting shortly. Please remember, there are sessions outside of this room, in the Chicago and the New York rooms, if I recall correctly, and there are going to be signs up that will help direct you to where you would like to go. And we'll see everyone back here at 4 p.m. Thank you again very much. There you go.